legal issues. Specifically in California, non-compete agreements are invalid. You can't be under a non-compete agreement. So, and there's a lot of game companies in California. So, if you're working in the San Francisco Bay Area or down in LA, you can pretty much freely hop from one company to another legally. So, and like Linda said, I'll just reiterate. Yeah, we are small and incestuous. I'm a nobody, but in the games industry, probably like half the people working on online games know who I am. So people go to different companies all the time. You're gonna run into different people. You meet people at conferences. The person that you meet, you could go drinking with, last night might be the person you're working with next month. So.
Also, the nature of many of the MMOs, particularly the theme park-oriented, really content-rich MMOs, means that you're staffing up to a level that you don't necessarily want to sustain as a business. Again, in our case with Global Agenda, it's a little different, but many of these MMOs, you're ramping from a core team up to 100 or hundreds of people, and the business can't sustain that, so it's kind of known coming in that you're going to be looking for something else afterwards, and so it's actually a good thing that those relationships are in place, and that's why you also tend to see hubs of game development develop in different locales, so that when one studio has less of a need, there's other studios that may be in a different part of the life cycle, so you're working with folks and cross-pollinating and sharing ideas, and again, I think that's good for the industry overall. So.
You have anything you want to add?
No, not particularly. I mean, ours is from honestly, Fusion Fall started within a TV network, so it's a strange enough business there. But yes, it's sometimes just as incestuous as I've seen people jump from Nick to Disney and onwards. But yes, in the MMO itself, our game designer has come and gone, and I've only recently been introduced as to how small a world it is. So.
And in SOA, I want to add as well that we've almost always got a major MMO in development. So as one game releases and you scale back that team, they get moved to another team. DCRO has about 1.5 billion people working on it right now, and I expect to see a number of those transfer to EQ next after that.
There is something to be said for that.
Definitely. Did anyone else have any questions? Wow. Okay. Hey, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, stand up. This is CK Knight from Curse. Here you go.
Hey there. One thing that I've seen a lot of companies do when they're developing an MMO is say that it's going to be the WoW killer, and I've found that that's the worst thing to say. How do your companies have dealt with that, or what's your opinions on that?
I think that's the most idiotic statement anybody could make, really. I mean, if there is going to be a WoW killer, it could be in a completely different genre or venue. I mean, the WoW killer is probably Farmville. You ever tried to get a raid going? Oh, I have to harvest my crops, I can't go now. I mean, Farmville has by far the most number of active players at one time in the industry. I mean, it's not really an MMO, but it's close enough, right? No, I think it's a terrible thing to do. Every game can stand on its own 2 feet, and you don't have to be a WoW killer to do really well and make money for your company.
I think I'll echo a comment from before, is that one of the things I like about free-to-play is that people are starting to play multiple games. So I don't really think you need a WoW killer. You just need a game that is not so demanding that somebody can play it while they're playing WoW or EQ2 or any other game. I'm obviously I develop games professionally, so one occupational hazard is I play a lot of MMOs, but it's really great. I love DDO just because it's free to play. I've thrown in some money. I buy adventure packs when I can, but there's no stress, there's no strain, there's no, oh my god, the clock is ticking because I'm paying my subscription this month. So DDO doesn't need to be a WoW killer for somebody to play it in addition to WoW. So I think that's kind of the mentality that a lot of companies are going to adopt going forward.
Yeah, the bigger games that tend to get the attention obviously have the big marketing and big development dollars behind it, and a lot of that comes from venture capitalists who see the revenue model of WoW and recurring revenue, and they have unrealistic expectations. So they, again, have huge teams staffed up. The expectations are very high. They have to be a WoW killer in order to make back the investors' money, and then it's a loss in everyone's mind, and sometimes really good games are seen as failures because they didn't hit those overly high, unrealistic expectations. So again, unfortunately, the past 2 years have been a lot of MMOs that have done that, and a lot of people have lost their jobs, and good games that again are maybe seen as failures even though they really have a niche following. So with free-to-play and these other models, there's the opportunity for smaller, kind of nimble developers to keep their team size small, keep their expectations a little bit lower, and not try to be a wow killer in terms of the business. Now, we did release a video in which we shot an elf, but that was something different.
Myself, no. Well, totally, that's a total setup. I mean, honestly,
I was going to say,
setting yourself up for disappointment at that one.
move the mic a little closer.
Sorry. But yeah, no, that's a bad situation to put yourself into. But honestly, it is. When you're trying to make a game that big that you have to be, yeah. Luckily, you didn't have to, so.
If I can kind of add a comment here too, kind of one of the MMOs that's been going around the news sites recently has been APB. Kind of a very high-profile failure. I think that's kind of shows the danger of trying to be a WoW killer. You pour so much money into something, and kind of echoing a comment again. One of the things that you got to look at though is what gets funded. I think APB is again a kind of a victim of this, where you had somebody who worked on the Grand Theft Auto series, who had this great idea for an MMO. You know, I'm sure the pitch meeting probably went, you take Grand Theft Auto, you make it an MMO, you get tons of money, it'll be great. That's, unfortunately, that's kind of what gets investors excited. If you go in there and say, I have this very modest plan, very reasonable, that will still make a good amount of money, they'll go, let's add some zeros onto that, and let's, crank up the return on investment by tenfold. And you're like, well, I can't promise that. Okay, next, I'm going to look for somebody who can.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. Okay, so hand up here. So here I come.
My question is, how is it that we as gamers can help games that go with alternate models? A lot of people, when they look at an MMO, especially if they're going the fantasy trope, they see, okay, I have to be a fighter, I have to be a healer, I have to be a mage. When a company tries to do something different, fans look at it and say, this isn't what I know, this isn't safe to me. And a lot of times the company doesn't do as well as they'd hoped, a lot because of the fans. I mean, what is it that we can do, or what is it that we can do to help you, so when you try something new, it doesn't become such a complicated point or a difficult point?
I'd like to thank the Carlsberg representative for attending this conference. We'll meet afterwards. Do you mean what can players do to provide feedback to help companies from making mistakes and making games that nobody wants to play? Is that what you're after?
I suppose.
I'll tell you one thing, and I'm a little biased because I head up the community team for SOE, but the vast majority of our feedback that we use to try to determine what players really want and what bothers them and what they want more of is the forums. Actually well-worded, detailed posts explaining exactly what it is you enjoy or don't enjoy about a particular game system or expansion, that sort of thing. That we collect up a metric ton of information every week to pass on forward. So I would say, don't come on the forums and say, this game sucks! Because that's not helpful to anybody. But if you actually make a post that's about 200 words long and list things point by point with as much detail as possible, that's worth its weight in gold to us. It really is.
Yeah, I think kind of looking at a larger issue, one of the things I've been kind of talking to people recently about is understand what impact your actions have, especially on different games. Like Linda just said, if you go in and say on the forum, say, this game sucks, we know obviously you don't mean the game sucks, because you're probably still subscribing. You're very passionate about it. That's definitely one thing that MMOs do, is they engender passion. And when somebody comes on and says this game sucks, we know that what they mean is I'm frustrated with some aspect of it. And Linda's right. That's exactly what we need for feedback. But also you got to look at what impression that gives somebody who's just going to scan the forums. I'm interested in this game. Let me go see what the forum's like. Well, everybody's posting how the game sucks. Obviously, this is going to be terrible. You're not helping anybody, and you're actually doing a lot of damage by letting your passions kind of get away from you. So being very direct with your feedback. I think the other thing too that you can really do is be patient. a lot of times, especially like, when you launch a game, no matter what scale it is, it's going to be a little rough, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to your original question, which I definitely feel deeply with Global Agenda, because as I mentioned, it's, half of a shooter and half of an MMO, and we think that peanut butter and chocolate combo works, but some people can't get their heads around it, especially game reviewers who are very, very busy, and when they get a copy, they want to clearly categorize it in their head, and they want it to have those conventions of classes and things like that, and if it takes more work, that may not be time they have to invest. So, one, I'll give a shout out to Sarah and the folks from Massively who have continually defended Global Agenda as, hey, whether it's an MMO or not, it's a hell of a lot of fun, so thank you very much for that. And that's cool. It's great to see that. And so I would say, to your question, what can you do? It's, when you find a game, whatever that game is, and if it doesn't fit in a category, the nice thing with social networking and conventions like this is word spreads really, really quickly. You don't need those traditional reviewers to necessarily get their head around it. So be vocal about the games that you like, and fortunately, thanks to how connected everyone is, that'll make experiments successful even if they defy some conventions.